the show. Tonight we are looking for America. And here, you are.
You know, I'm looking for America. Beating red, white, and blue for the green we pursue. I'm still looking for you. America, who are you? Underneath the red, blue, and white. Yeah. America, who are you? I wonder who you are tonight. Tell me who you are. America, who are you?
Freedom. I don't know. I was gonna say freedom.
I think America was a country founded on great ideals and great values, and really was a country that was set to lead the way. I think what it's become is not quite that. I think we've gotten to a point where this country has become like a big casino. It's a few winners, a few jackpot winners, and then a whole lot of losers. It seems like corporate America, almost like a shadow nation inside of ours, has begun to take over. I hope we can get back to our ideals, a country that was a country of the many, and really was a country of innovation and great leaders and moving forward, and not so much of corporate takeover.
Freedom, get a better education, that's about it. And a lot of other stuff, I just can't think of any right now.
Yeah, it was, but I don't know why, it just was.
It just was.
For me, right now, because this is the time that I'm alive, so for everyone else, I guess it could be different, but I'm alive now, this is my time, so I guess I'd have to say right now.
The best time of this country, well, being a millennial, just on the tail end of it at 32 years old, I'd have to go back to a time that I wasn't around for. I would say the presidential years of FDR, where we pulled ourselves out of the Great Depression, got through World War II, strengthened our middle class, and really became great manufacturers, and a country that established the golden age of a middle class that was revered by countries all over the world. Hopefully we can get back to that place. That's why I'm out here doing what I'm doing.
We're on the campus of Youngstown State University today, here in Youngstown, Ohio. We're out here, we've been asking people, again, just questions about America. We're looking for America. This is our second week. If you haven't seen the first video, you can look at that. We could put it right here, the magic of editing. It will pop up a little link to it right there. So today we were out asking a different question. We have one of our candidates, Donald Trump, this year, who says, his big thing is make America great again. So we wanted to ask people out here the question of, okay, when was America great? Is it now? Some people answered now. Some people that didn't want to be on camera said, well, maybe back when it first started, or back in colonial times. People have these thoughts of when was it a great nation? When was it good? Is it now? Is it before? Is it something that we can return to? So that's the kinds of questions that we've been asking people. But I think something very important for us to realize and that we can all kind of come to an understanding of is the historical aspect of it, and that is this, that America has some skeletons in the closet, if we want to say it that way, or America has some things that we can't ever really go back to a certain era or a certain time period and say, well, this definitively was the best time. America was great at this point, because unfortunately at any point in that history we have similar things, and sometimes even worse things than we see today. It's easy to look at today's world and say, it's gotten pretty bad and we need to restore it to something it was. But all throughout history, all throughout time, all throughout the nation's history, it's been things that we can put a finger on and say, this wasn't right. So let me give you some examples. So in 1492, you know, there's that old rhyme, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. So Christopher Columbus, we still celebrate Christopher Columbus today for what he did. We have a holiday each year about it. Well, before Columbus arrived in 1492, of course we know, he thought he had arrived in India, so we called these people the Indians. Well, they weren't Indians, they were the people that lived here, the native people, the Native Americans. But before he arrived, there were 10 million of those Native Americans. There were 10 million indigenous peoples living here. That's an estimate. But by 1900, by the year 1900, there were actually less than 300,000 left. And so obviously there's a big change there. And so what happened to them? Well, unfortunately, it was a lot of colonists coming in and removing them. It was a lot of people coming in and killing them or moving them from one place to another. And in that move, they died. Some examples, Christopher Columbus himself, unfortunately, as we celebrate him a lot of times, he was one of the probably worst people we could think of, maybe on the same terms of Hitler or something, because let me give you a very brief one story about him, and this is where you may want to censor if kids are listening or whatever, because it's not a good story. In 1492, when he arrived, first of all, he met the Lucayan natives who helped him to repair his broken ship. They had become shipwrecked. And so they helped him repair his shipwrecked ship, the Santa Maria, and he sailed back to Spain to report his findings to the Queen. And she gave him more ships, an army of 1,500 men, and countless weapons of swords, crossbows, and cannons. So when he arrived, he got all that stuff with his 1,500 men. He sailed back to America. When he arrived on the American land, the natives came out as they had before. They met him, they talked to him, whatever. But he ordered the natives who met him at the shore to turn over all their gold and food, as well as providing all of their women so that he and his army could have sex with them, is essentially what it was. So they could essentially rape them. And so he said, hey, you need to do this. Of course they said, we're not giving you all our food. We're not giving you our resources, our gold, our women. We're not doing that. And so Christopher Columbus ordered his army to cut off the noses and the ears of the men that had met him at the shoreline, and he sent them back to the tribe and said, this is what happens when you cross us. You better not do it again. And so they showed up. Christopher Columbus and his crew showed up and then in the town, and the natives continued to fight against him, and so he slaughtered the tribe. These same people who had just helped him fix the Santa Maria, he killed them all. He raped some of the women, and he even fed some of these people alive to the hunting dogs that they had brought with them. This is just one of many, many similar stories involving Christopher Columbus in 1492 coming to America. And so, you know, you have this time where it's like we celebrate this character, and yet we can't celebrate that kind of thing going on. We can't say that was a great time, right? Now, we also have, of course, the election. We said, man, it's gotten really bad with the slander and the people going back and forth. We need to get back to the old times where, you know, the old candidates, they just used to be just arm in arm and just such a great, you know, fair election. But in the 1800 election, Thomas Jefferson's campaign said this about his opponent, John Adams. He said, John Adams has a hideous, hermaphroditical character. He has neither the force and firmness of a man, nor the gentleness and sensibility of a woman. And so Adams then heard that, and he got angry. He responded by saying, Thomas Jefferson is a mean-spirited, low-lived fellow, the son of a half-breed Indian squaw. So you see these things in the news and online, and it's like we think that's bad, but it's been going on since the very beginning, since 1800 when they started these things. The 1825 election, John Quincy Adams said about Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson's mother was a prostitute. He literally came out and said that to everyone, which is a crazy thing, but they were doing that back then, just making up whatever sounded good and just throwing it out there, and now we have TV to be able to do that. But So that, you know, we can't really say, well, that was the good times. Those were the good old elections where everybody did things fair and didn't make things up. It's always been the way that it is now. And so getting back into even the more, I mean, that's kind of like funny type stuff, but getting into that serious stuff again, from 1830 to 1838, cotton growers forced 100,000 Native Americans out of their homeland from the southern states to Oklahoma. And this is often what's referred to as the Trail of Tears. It was a time when the Indians, the Cherokee people specifically, were 10,000 of them, or 100,000 of them, as I said, were forced from that land, brought up to Oklahoma, and it resulted in 4,000 Cherokee deaths, them dying of cold, hunger, and disease. And so, again, just the people who had lived here forcing them out, and we can't go back to any of these times and say, oh, this was a great time. It wasn't. It could have been great in some ways. It was great when they made the Constitution, when they said all men are created equal. That's great. It was great when they, all these different things we could say, well, this was a good part, this was a good part, but we can never go back and say, this is the standard, this was great, this time in America's history was great. We can't really get to that point. We had, of course, the whole nation essentially built on the backs of slavery. For some time, the African people really, that came in. And in 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation was given, finally ending slavery in the Union States. And it was not until 2 years later, in 1865, that it was all of the states, and it finally became illegal to own slaves in America. And of course, from that point on, for leading 100 years later, in 1965, there was still problems, still different people having to go to different water fountains and all sorts of things. So as we can look at our history, just as we can today, we can say, hey, there's some great stuff going on in America right now. We can think of some great, awesome things. But for us to say, well, let's make America great again, or let's, the question has to become what we've been asking people out here. When was it ever great? When was it ever that standard? And my answer is, the only answer I can give is there's this guy who used to sing all the time. He still does, I guess, but he was real cheesy, and he was singing all these Christian songs, and he had this song called "The Only Hope for America is Jesus." It was another cheesy song he wrote, but it actually kind of makes some sense. It actually is the reality, is that there's only one answer to the repetitive cycle of hate, retribution, and war, and that is this countercultural love, which is what Jesus came to bring. And so when we get into these conversations, we have to realize that it's not going to be through the country, it's not going to be through America that's going to be some saving thing, it's not going to be through any candidate, as great as they might be. It's not going to be through a candidate that's going to save us. It's only going to be through the countercultural love that Jesus came to talk about that is going to save the country. And if you're out there watching that saying, oh, this is a cheesy way to end the video, you've been talking about things, but getting into that, that's kind of cheesy. Well, the reality is that we all know something different has to happen for these kinds of things to change. And just getting back at somebody or doing the same old stuff, it's not gonna change anything. So we need that counterculture. We need that totally opposite way of thinking to take place. Amos 5 says, let justice roll down like a river, righteousness like a never-ending stream. And that justice comes through Christ. That justice, God's justice, is Christ saying, hey, I'm going to punish somebody else so that you can be free, and I'm going to do that, and that act is the act of love. And so as we're out here today and we're asking people, I have my point of view, which I've shared with you guys. Different people had other points of view that we saw today. Some people may have agreed with me, but we want to hear from everybody. We had a good conversation last time. We see some comments and some stuff during this video of what happened last week. But make sure you comment on the video, send an email or something like that, and just continue the conversation, because just because I've said something in a video doesn't mean that I'm 100% right. I could be wrong. I could be saying something that I believe in, and I could be off base or something. So continue that conversation, and let's continue talking as we continue looking for America in these next 2 weeks.
America, you so pretty, but you not perfect. Confession of guilt is worth it. These people hurt and deserve it. Blood on your hands, I saw when it's blood on this nation's floor, but it's blood on the upper post of your door. If you need to know, I'm looking for your honesty and skeletons.